stakeholders from various ministries in Kenya held a 3-day conference at the Kenya School of Government in Nairobi to deliberate on pertinent issues relating to gender-based violence in our society. Gender-based violence is a serious global health challenge, human rights violation, and development issue that continues to pose a challenge in the 21st century. GBV is defined as any act of violence meted to an individual based on their gender that results in physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering as per the WHO.
1 out of every 3 women suffers from or is a victim of GBV. And when you just put that into context, that's almost 30% of half of the population of Kenya.
A survey on the prevalence of GBV during the COVID-19 pandemic undertaken by the National Crime Research Center showed that the number of GBV cases recorded between January and June 2020 had shot up by 92.2% compared to the same period in the previous years, which is quite a high number.
We are bold and we are committed to continue the support, and we will take bold steps to end violence against women and girls. We will also take initiatives that will put women and girls at the heart of new digital and green economies by catalyzing creation of jobs and opportunities that will make them less vulnerable to GBV. If a woman is economically empowered, she can actually walk out of abusive relationships.
Whereas Kenya is the co-lead for the Generation Equality Action Coalition on GBV, Finland is the co-lead of the Action Coalition on Technology and Innovations. We want to bridge the digital gender gap. We want to increase women in STEM, meaning science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and develop gender-sensitive technology and innovations, and eliminate online GBV.
We know that gender-based violence issues are complex, cross-cutting, and disproportionately affect women, girls, and other vulnerable groups, and result in real physical and psychological harm. Many victims of gender-based violence also face economic deprivation, stigma, and isolation that jeopardizes their safety and well-being, as well as that of their families and their entire communities. This year alone, PEPFAR has provided $379 million with an additional $38 million for other health programs. Although progress has been made over the past many years, the 2019 Kenya Violence Against Children survey showed that violence in childhood is still common, and there are increases in physical and sexual violence against adolescent girls.
In the ministry, we've been able to, with our partners, develop that manual, and the manual will provide a detailed guideline for the role that the criminal justice system plays, as well as the health practitioner role that they play when it comes to ensuring that clients are able to access these services. This manual will include training that will be delivered in a multisectoral approach to clinicians, the government chemist, to the police, to legal officers, and the judiciary.
Kenya's GBV response has identified that availability of comprehensive GBV care, along with strong social protection systems and strengthened response preparedness, will go a long way to avoid unintended consequences of GBV in all circumstances, including humanitarian and conflict situations. This comes after Kenya Health Information System data for January to June 2021 revealed that 10,997 females and 717 males were victims of GBV. This was higher compared to a similar period in the year 2020, where 7,291 females and 500 males had been victims.
And confronted with the loss of home, denial to access my children, confronted with the HIV that was then highly stigmatized. It was a very difficult experience at that time.
When people go to report to the police, and someone is going to report about emotional violence, someone actually said one day, go, if you're beaten, this is my number, call me. That's a gender desk officer. Now, from my experience as a psychologist, I know very well the impact of emotional violence. So then how does our law, even in the law, how do we prove that someone is going through emotional violence? Yet, before a bamboo is seen, the roots have already taken like 5 kilometers away.
As per the efforts to end gender-based violence, the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Public Service, Gender, Senior Citizens Affairs and Special Programs spearheaded a 3-day scientific conference under the theme Tackling GBV During Adversity Beyond Timely Reaction. This brought together stakeholders in the health sector, security, judiciary, counties, among others, to reflect on ways to strengthen multi-sectoral engagements in the prevention and response of the continued threat of gender-based violence in the 21st century.
To prevent that from happening to one more child, to one more girl, to one more boy, to one more man, to one more woman. That is the call of the national government, or the government under the leadership of His Excellency the President.
The Kenya-Finland bilateral GVB program has developed seasonal calendars of GBV risk and vulnerability for 3 target counties: Bungoma, Kilifi, and Samburu. And these calendars are designed to alert and to align prevention and response efforts to the unique incidents and patterns of GVB in each county. Each calendar shows the different needs across each month, together with unique prevention opportunities. The calendars clearly capture the periods marked by food insecurity, income stress, and important cultural events and celebrations that are associated with the increased risk and vulnerability to GVB.
There's a lot that is being done, and NACADA has a helpline, 1192. On NACADA website, we can also be able to see all the particular rehabilitation service providers, and we'll be able to assist one another. In terms of parents running away from their duty, our Children's Act is very clear on the right to parental care. Every child has a right to parental care, and therefore we should invoke this in terms of ensuring that we are bringing our parents back. Again, a lot of programs have been there in terms of parental empowerment. At Menken, we work with parental empowerment facilitators so that we can equip parents with the skills and knowledge to be able to support their children. Of course, this is in line with many other factors in terms of economic support and so forth, so that then we are able to empower parents to take their dutiful role in bringing up the children. Ben, a lot is being done on work with the young people. We have Sitakimia kind of advocacy campaigns around ending GBV. We have the Me Too launched in the universities, and various universities have particular channels to report GBV.
The shelter is a big issue, especially while we are even sometimes willingly taking them, that thinking that we are going to offer protection, then we put them more at risk. So the issue of shelter is broader, and I think this conference needs to note that is something that we need to deliberate about, how they are registered, their places of care. And if they are places of care, there are certain regulation and registration procedures that needs to be in place. There's a gap there, and I would just want to acknowledge that gap. And as this conference will take note, then because this conference is organized between Ministry of Health and the State Department of Gender, this is a conversation that they need to take and move forward with.
Dr. Rose Wafula, the head at the National AIDS and STI Control Program, stated that the cost of GBV is too much and it is critical that all stakeholders should come out and act on ending GBV amongst our communities.
We have a chance for demographic dividend reap as a country. If you compare with the developed world, we have a lot of older people. But as a country, we are endowed with a young population, if well harnessed, can be a great impetus for economic development. However, as a country, that same young population is faced with a myriad of serious issues.
GBV policy documents and response products were disseminated on day one of the conference, and this include the revised MOH 365, revised PRC form, revised MOH 364, and the PRC kit.
Recently, we started conversation last year, asking ourselves, what is it that we can do differently in this country? How do we make the money work? And we actually said, as we examined the epidemic, examined our data, we realized that the biggest challenge in this country for a young person is new HIV infection, a teenage pregnancy, and sexual and gender-based violence. And we dubbed them the triple threat. And we then began to have another conversation. Who is actually missing on the table to be systematic and to help us in this whole discussion? And we landed ourselves and said, we reorganize ourselves to the Nyumba Kumi initiative. We'll break the silence from that. And then we hosted the 47 county commissioners and 8 regional commissioners. For the first time, the entire government was in one forum, single forum. And we began these conversations, and they said, the Ministry of Interior said, actually, these are conversations we need to have and report the same way we report crime in this country. So the triple threat campaign began.
We have to start by actual recognition of intersex persons, and that requires of a law. So once we have a law that recognizes intersex persons, then we move even to the birth certificates, for the birth certificates to acknowledge that we have intersex persons. And then also when it comes to the medical field, we will hope that the Ministry of Health will guide us with a protocol for handling intersex persons. So you know what to do in the event that the person presenting themselves at that time may appear as a boy but was registered differently, and just a seamless way that all medical facilities across the board will be able to handle.
I would consider a health worker who sits there and doles out pills to adolescents as being irresponsible and actually promoting a hazardous situation for those youngsters. What we should be doing is to protect them, to give them an opportunity to be able to grow up, to be citizens who can participate.
We need to start identifying those hotspots where GBV is likely to occur and put in mechanisms. Start thinking of strategies, putting in some finances so that we are able to contain, not just to respond, but also to prevent. Then the other action point is we need to roll out policy documents that were launched here by our able CECs, CS. Then the other action point is incorporate GBV services in the annual work plan. We've been informed that the National Annual Work Plan template does not have a component on GBV. So as we go back to our counties, can we ensure that that portion is captured? I know it's captured under the RAMCA or RH, but GBV needs to stand alone so that watu waanze kuongea GBV. Sindio?
GBV lays a burden on the MOH health system. For us to expect any fruits, we must initiate change in our communities, religion, champions, mosques and schools. Counties and communities should be empowered to be the focus of GBV. The response and referral pathways must be harmonized. Counties should raise their voices to expand the space for male survivors.
Many countries, including Kenya, at least 1 in every 3 women has experienced either physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. And we've seen this from our KDHS report. It's not different for children. We've seen the World WHO statistics that are very, very disturbing, that 1 billion children experience violence annually. Our VAX survey was also very disturbing to see that despite all the good efforts we have, our most recent survey still showed that half of the children who participated had experienced either physical or sexual violence. So we still have work to do. So if a woman undergoes violence, she's going to suffer physical injuries, depression, sexual reproductive health problems. They can get into substance abuse. But not only that, we have evidence coming out fast and furious showing us in a home where violence is happening, intimate partner violence is happening, then the children are also affected whether they're undergoing violence or not. The first thing is that it's most likely that they'll be experiencing violence, but even witnessing violence is now found to be a very serious risk factor for future perpetration in boys and future experience in girls. So if you sit there and think about children observing their parents undergoing violence and they'll be future perpetrators, this is a very good reason for us to start preventing violence even at that age.
And some of us here are from counties that have very high prevalence of FGM, and our focus is on 22 counties, and these 22 counties are represented here, and we already know what we are doing at the counties to make sure that we end FGM. One thing I want to say is that we are on course, we are committed, and we are focused on the goal, which is to end GBV, FGM, and all forms of harmful practices that are affecting our women and girls not to be able to move forward in whatever area of their lives that they are supposed to really thrive in, because we know that the communities where we live, women and girls are very important component. Men are very important component too, but we also know that women have been left behind for a very long time. And as we move to 2030, which is the SDGs goal that says that no one should be left behind, then we should make sure that our women and girls are given a very good environment where they can be able to really achieve whatever they need to achieve so that they can be better and we have better communities.
We must focus on our education institutions because we are not isolated from the social norms, cultural norms, and whatever else that happens in our country and beyond. And if it is not well and properly addressed, schools and indeed other educational institutions can legitimize and reinforce harmful gender practices. We can become places where we norm the wrong thing instead of norming the right thing. And that is why we have to take care that we do not legitimize this. And how do we legitimize in the schools? Many of you will remember what looked like innocent comments that, maths is not the thing for girls. Maybe you should be cooking. You know, they look soft, but this is how you legitimize a gender-based response that should not be happening in our institutions. We can legitimize by, even though we have laws on policies on corporal punishment, they continue to happen. When you enter an education institution and you find a teacher, a principal holding a stick, and when you ask them, say, no, I'm not using it, then why are you holding it? You do not hold something that you do not intend to use, isn't it?
The IG, the judiciary, the health component comes. But family level, parenting, societal norms, societal mindset is where the gist of the matter is for us to bring social norm change.
So to start with, we have to start asking, what's the risk in intergenerational transfer of violence? How do you deal with that particular risk? And one of the realities then you see is even countries that have been in active war for a long time, for example, South Africa, is the frozen trauma of children that then when they are adults, then they become violators. So if we are going to look at then primary and secondary prevention, is to then say as a country, if we've had active conflict in any community, then you already know that community is a recipe for intergenerational trauma. So how then do you deal with that? You must deal first and foremost with preventing violence, communal violence from happening in communities. And here is where then you borrow the tools from peace builders, where you begin to look at how do you address root causes of violence, especially overt open violence in communities, so that then that violence then becomes the trauma that the children are going to get to grow up with, and eventually the emotional violence that you get.
The planners should communicate about the conference early enough, at least like 3 months before, so that we can give all the participants time enough to prepare the abstracts.
We need to sensitize mostly on to sensitize to the children on GBV, especially in schools, churches, and mosques, and in the communities also. Then we've also learned that prevention is better than response, and therefore we need to concentrate more on prevention as much as we concentrate on response of GBV and SGBV.
Take a look at the center of the room. That is where the survivors are. What does that show you? Survivors, hakuna vile conference itakuwa inatengenezwa ya GBV, but survivors wenye wana show up ni less. They are part of this. So, as a future proposal, wenye wanafanya communication, please, can you also focus on survivors?
We need synchronized data from all sources. So there's one referral point for all the data. We need to contribute to ending GBV in any small way. We stop lamenting. Then we need to focus on the root cause of GBV, not just the consequences. Diversify the GBV strategies so that we don't just hit and run, having 3-day sessions and then that's it. Then we have to have a responsibility to push for resource mobilization for GBV programs, then advocate for political goodwill in counties that GBV program is low.
And all that we have discussed is an eye-opener to the counties, and most importantly, working in collaboration with each key player will bear more fruit and will be more impactful.
If we came together, all of us, government, society, partners, all of us together, we are able to demonstrate and see the outcome. And I'm hoping that all that has been said can be brought into action so that we can really fight SGBV. That is one. Then secondly, I only want to commit again on behalf of the UN family that we are part of you, we are with you to make sure that Kenya indeed demonstrate the fight against SGBV.
Our call for action is to make sure that everything that has come out of here, we go and implement at our counties. The next time when we meet again, if it will be 1 year or 2 years later, we should be able to come back and ask ourselves, how far have we gone in terms of implementation? When it comes to survivors, we know that most of us are survivors, but only a few survivors have spoken up. But we have so many of us here who have suffered gender-based violence, may it be teenage pregnancies. Maybe some of us here suffered teenage pregnancies when we were growing up, and it really changed the course of our life. Because when you become a teenage mother, then you find yourself you cannot continue with school, especially before we had the policy, the education policy, that allows girls who are pregnant or who are teenage mothers to go back to school. So every time we have a teenage mother, that child or that girl's life has changed because they are not able to move forward with their lives. So
that child who will be molested, that child who will face physical violence, that child who will face FGM, that child who will be raped, that man who also will be raped, who will also suffer physical violence, because the issue of men and gender-based violence sometimes is not talked about, but it is within the scope of our discussion.
We must end FGM. We must end GBV.
Creating awareness and accountability on the burden of GBV will impact on the society across the different time periods and life's course.
Tutaishi kwa raha, ni jukumu
tuje sote walimwengu, tukomeshe dhuluma za kijinsia kweli, tukomeshe dhuluma za jamii, ndipo tutaishi kwa raha. Walimwengu, walimwengu, tukomeshe dhuluma za kijinsia kweli, tukomeshe dhuluma kwa jamii, ndipo tutaishi kwa raha.
I think the other important message has been the clarification of the way we work with the different sectors. How do we in health collect samples when somebody has been violated? How do we? What is the chain of custody? What are the issues that the other sectors are facing? The fact that we are in the same room talking together means that we are building a team that can address the problem for our citizens.
The cost of GBV is too much, looking at all sectors, whether it's from an economic and health, education or development point of view, from a health sector point of view, and a security point of view. It's been critical that all sectors have, come out strongly and say this is a costly affair and it's time that we all acted and ending this. And the other thing that has come out very strongly is we all agree that prevention is the best thing, and just challenging ourselves, what does it take to prevent GBV.
So just to create awareness of the policies and acts which are there, and also to create awareness on what services can be offered should you undergo GBV. We know GBV not only affects women and young children and vulnerable populations, but also we have seen a rising increase in GBV against men as well.
And therefore we have also involved men in this conversation so that going forward we can have a multi-sectoral approach or multi-sectoral redress of gender-based issues in our country.
We are also concerned about going into an election. So as we go into the election period, we are also expecting to see an increase in the number of GBV. Women tend to be very exposed when it comes to, especially when election campaigns turn violent. The biggest, the people who bear the greatest brands are women and children.
tukomeshe dhuluma za kijinsia. Kweli, tukomeshe dhuluma kwa jamii. Ndipo tutaishi kwa raha. Ni jukumu letu sote walimwengu, tukomeshe dhuluma za kijinsia. Kweli, tukomeshe dhuluma kwa jamii. Ndipo tutaishi kwa raha. Walimwengu, walimwengu, tukomeshe dhuluma za kijinsia. Kweli, tukomeshe dhuluma kwa jamii. Ndipo tutaishi kwa raha. Walimwengu, walimwengu, tukomeshe